Economists say the markets have welcomed the medium-term budget policy statement tabled by the Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana. The MTBPS showed that the country's economic growth forecast has been revised down from 0.9% to 0.8% in 2023. And this is due to continued growth outlook constraints due to weak global economic growth and continued energy and logistics issues. It further notes that the weaker projection for the year mainly reflects a weak household consumption due to higher inflation, elevated interest rates and low net exports.
The country continues to grapple with high inflation, elevated interest rates and high fuel costs, amongst others. This is reflected in the weaker projection for the year by the National Treasury. Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana says due to the underperformance in revenue collections and increased spending pressures, government has no other choice but to continue to borrow around 553 billion rand per year.
Every national rand of revenue collected is 1 rand less which have to be borrowed. Madam Speaker, allow me to frame our fiscal challenges as follows. Government spending exceeded revenue since the 2008 global financial crisis. These rising annual budget deficits have reached an extent where the government will have to borrow an average of 553 billion per year over the medium term.
God says the budget deficit is projected to reach 4.9% in 2023-24. This is due to lower revenue performance, higher wage bill costs and higher projected debt service costs. Economists say the budget was welcomed by the bond market despite the devastating numbers announced.
The bond market has actually, in the immediate aftermath of the announcement, the bond market has actually rallied. In other words, it's actually reacted with some strength, so compressing about 10 basis points at the long end of the curve, meaning that long-dated bonds are up close to 1% in the immediate aftermath of these announcements.
The rand has also strengthened against the dollar post the minister's speech.
I think given the rand's reaction, as we've seen that it was almost 0.5% weaker before the speech, and we see now it has regained most of the ground. It says that most market participants saw the speech as being acceptable. But the biggest problem continues that we know for a fact that we are good in putting things on paper. Implementation becomes a big problem, and also plans to borrow on average 553.7 billion over 3 years. That's very worrisome.
But some say the MTBPS poses a risk for the country to have a negative credit rating.
This obviously risks a impact on the credit ratings. The credit rating agencies are likely to see the budget as credit negative because of the increase in the planned borrowings, and of course that risks South Africa seeing the credit rating outlook turn negative, or if actually seeing a credit rating downgrade from at least one of the 3 key credit rating agencies. However, downgrades are not necessarily going to happen because there have been a lot of efforts throughout the MTBPS statement.
Godongwana says the country's debt levels are due to rising debt services costs crowding out imported social spending. At the same time, economists say although the markets are reacting positively to the MTBPS, South Africans should be worried. Nothando Makutulela, SABC News, Johannesburg.
For more on this, we're now joined by CEO of 360 Global Solutions Group and economics commentator, Khandani Msibi, and he joins us via our video link. Khandani, thank you so much for joining us here on the late edition. Perhaps let's start off here and just get your reaction in terms of the midterm budget we saw earlier today.
Yeah, good evening. And I think the minister had a very difficult job to do with regards to an economy that is growing and the expenditure level that is growing. You have an economy declining or not growing fast enough, and then you also have expenses growing faster than the economy is actually growing. And therefore, the minister finds himself where he's actually collecting less taxes but has more expenditure to make. But I think for me, this is one of those areas where the National Treasury knew all along for the past 3 to 4 years that we were riding on a wave of commodity prices that were high, and therefore collecting more taxes from the mining industry on the basis of super profits that they were generating. But we all knew that this will come to an end, and it sadly has come to an end, and we find ourselves where the level of debt accumulation is actually accelerating, and it's not good for the economy, given that we are going to become more indebted as a country than we were in the past.
And Khandani, you speak a lot about tax revenue, and that we knew that this was most likely to happen anytime soon. What is your take when it comes to the tax increases we are most likely to see next year? Of course, I mean, that's at least 15 billion rand in tax increases.
It's very sad in that the tax base of South Africa is very small. And I think all the economic analysts have been indicating that we're having a very small and not growing tax base of people that are contributing to the tax collections of the SARS. And as a result, it's almost like we're trying to get more and more out of more and more blood out of a stone. And I think at some point we will reach a cul-de-sac. I mean, the fact that the minister is looking at getting a debt of 500 billion rands, because 553 billion rands is more than 500 billion rands. And it's a lot of money that we are taking as a country. Yes, we're big as a country, but at the end of the day, when you don't have the prospect of economic growth, you have a problem taking more debt. And unfortunately for me, the minister appears like a one-legged dancer. You need 2 legs to dance. Right? In your dancing, for Minister of Finance, you need to have a strong fiscal policy. You also need to have a strong monetary policy. But our monetary policy civil servants have counted themselves out of the country as independent agents that are not accountable to this country and are indifferent to what the country is going through. And I think therein lies the dilemma of the minister. The minister needs to have 2 legs to dance with: what he does with the monetary policy and what he does with the fiscal policy. But he seems to have no control of the monetary policy, and hence zero mention of a monetary policy consideration in his speech. And I think that leaves us as a country much more poorer and becoming poorer, because the monetary policy has left us, and we have to grapple with the fiscal policy adjustments that are not enough to actually get the economy growing, which is what we need. What we need is that the economy must grow, but the economy is not growing.
Yeah, and going into this midterm budget statement, of course, we kept on hearing that the minister needs to cut back on the budget, and at the same time, we kept on hearing that he will be forced to borrow because, unfortunately, because of the state coffers in the way that they look like. When it comes to him cutting more now over the next a couple of years, what will that look like? I know that this will force for many departments to either merge and for some to also freeze some of those very strategic positions in their departments.
It's a rabbit hole that you are getting into, because I mean, like all households, cutting back is not always easy, because cutting back on its own is a regression, in that you're actually going backwards. As a family or as households, you want to continue to increase your expenditure, but you can only increase your expenditure if you are increasing your income. And I think the country as a household on its own is at a point where it is failing to increase its income, and therefore it is left with the options of cutting back. But cutting back, nobody grows by cutting back, right? Because you can cut back on expenditure, but reality is that the population continues to grow. And as a result, the growth of the population is dragging you towards more expenditure and not towards less expenditure. So he has a difficult dance in that his dance is towards the reduction of expenditure, whereas his dance should be towards the increase of income. And he's constrained in that the monetary policy civil servants, like I said, have counted themselves out of growing the economy. That's why interest rates are too high for our economy. Right? The Reserve Bank will tell you that they're raising interest rates to curb inflation. But the inflation in South Africa is not demand driven. You can raise interest rates all you like. You're not going to tamper with inflation that is driven by imported oil, and also driven by administered prices, and also driven by the fact that we have a highly concentrated economy. All of those three factors requires different intervention to just raising interest rate, because it's a blunt instrument for what you're going through as a country. But we do need to have a situation where the minister can dance with two legs and not with one leg.
And coming to the social relief of a distress grant, that has been extended to at least March 2025 at a cost of 34 billion rand. And I'm going to ask this question, and one would say, as we go into 2024 elections, what role did that play in extending the social relief grant?
I don't think the social relief grant have got much to do with elections than to do with our safety as people. That you can just imagine that any South African who is a law-abiding, upstanding South African, if they have to contend with their children starving, that they then become non-law-abiding South Africans.
Yeah.
We do need, as a South African, to have a situation where we have a safety net so that our fellow citizens don't become barbaric, right? And I'd like to contain the conversation around the social ground and relief to say that we need to make sure that no South African starves to a point where they become desperate and they become violent against other South Africans. I think the whole issue of elections is a small matter. But the issue of our safety is that we as society should not allow fellow South Africans to starve or to have their children starve.
And before I let you go, Khandani, of course, I also wanted to touch on the SOEs. We heard from the likes of Eskom and Transnet, a tougher stance here being taken by the minister. What is your take on that?
My take is that Eskom is a South African economy. All the money that the state draws from the tax base, that money is drawn because there is Eskom, in whatever form it is. Without Eskom, the entire South African economy grounds to a halt. Right? And therefore, the tax base of South African grounds to zero if there's no Eskom. We need Eskom. And I think one of the biggest problems that we have is that the private sector, in particular the coal sector, has not come out and thanked South Africa for Transnet. In the past 2 years, during the Ukraine war, the coal industry has made billions of rands in profit, right? And it cannot be that Transnet is not recognized for its contribution toward the export of coal to all of those countries that wanted coal in order to contend with the sanctions against Russia for its oil. So as a country, it's important that we become fair to the state and fair to the SOEs and recognize their contributions. Both Transnet in its coal lines, as well as a Portnet in its ports for the export of coal. There's companies that have made billions of rands during this environment. The fact that Transnet is in a very bad position,
all
there
right,
are all
Khandani.
other factors that we may not be aware of.
All right, Khandani, thank you so much for your time and for your insight. That is Khandani Msibi, the CEO of 360 Global Solutions and also an economic analyst there, just giving us further, painting a bleak picture from what we heard earlier from Minister Enoch Godongwana when it comes to the medium-term budget policy statement.